Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be with you today in my capacity as chair of the UN Women's Empowerment Principles New Zealand Committee. We are so pleased that you could join us today for this wonderful webinar. Thank you for being a part of this growing movement. Together, we are stronger, and together we lead change. The purpose of today's session is to connect, to learn, and to share insights as we advance gender equality and gender empowerment across Aotearoa, New Zealand. The Women's Empowerment Principles was created by UN Women and the UN Global Compact, and it is a global framework to guide businesses in championing gender equality across the workplace, the marketplace, and our community. It is grounded in labor and human rights standards, and they recognize that business not only benefits from gender equality, but we have a responsibility to deliver it. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we all know that when a CEO signs up for the WEPs, they make a public top-level commitment to equal pay for work of equal value, to safe and inclusive workplaces, and to gender-responsive supply chains, to zero tolerance harassment, and the list goes on. But this is not abstract ideals. These are actions that transform lives. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, 4 organizations carry out this work together. UN Women Aotearoa, New Zealand, advancing global standards and programs across New Zealand and the Pacific. BPW New Zealand, which was established in 1939, a volunteer apolitical organization dedicated to improving the status of women. Zonta International District 16, which empowers women worldwide through service and advocacy, and the Human Rights Commission, ensuring dignity, equality, and respect for all. One of the most valuable resources that is available to WEPs signatories and supporters is the WEPs and the NZ Policy Research Institute Gender Equity Survey. And this is not simply a reporting exercise. It is a mirror, a guide, and a catalyst. By completing the survey, organizations gain clarity, a clear picture of where they stand on gender equality across leadership, culture, policies, and practices. Credibility, the ability to demonstrate commitment to investors, customers, and employees who expect transparency and accountability. Strategy, these are data and insight that inform future planning, helping leaders to set achievable, measurable goals. And of course, recognition, visibility through the White Camellia Awards and alignment with internationally respected UN frameworks. We also have a talent advantage, the ability to attract top talent, particularly younger generations who choose workplaces more frequently that reflect their values. And last but very not least is momentum. This is an evidence-based starting point for long-term transformation. Wherever you are in the organization, it doesn't matter. You're starting now and continuing to make progress. Most importantly, this survey is open to any organization committed to equality, not only existing signatories and supporters. It offers breadth and flexibility, a comprehensive tool for those ready to measure across all of the 7 principles, and a practical entry point for those choosing to focus on just one principle as they begin. I will allow our esteemed keynote speakers here to delve a little bit further into the 7 principles of the WEPs. And with this context, I now do have the pleasure of introducing our first esteemed keynote speaker. Professor Gail Pacheco is the Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission. She is a distinguished economist and has served as the director of the New Zealand Policy Research Institute at AUT and as commissioner at the New Zealand Productivity Commission. Dr. Pacheco's work spans collaborations across academia, government, community, with a focus on pay equity and social well-being. Gail has received numerous honors, including the NZIER Economics Award, the AUT Medal, and life membership of the New Zealand Association of Economists. As the EEO Commissioner, Dr. Pacheco leads New Zealand's statutory responsibility to promote equal employment opportunities and pay equity, advancing our nation's commitment to decent work under Sustainable Development Goal number 8. We are so honored to have her with us. Gail, the floor is yours, and thank you so much.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for that introduction, Tara. I'm here just to take a few minutes, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, to explain why completing this UN WEP survey is really important for organizations to do. And I can do that through a variety of perspectives. As Tara mentioned, I used to be director of the New Zealand Policy Research Institute, so used to be which is the organization that leads running of the survey. I'm now on the other side looking at the data more so from my role as EEO commissioner. And I've also been in a situation where I've worked with a number of organizations, individual organizations, on their data in a number of spaces, so know what happens at the organizational level. So looking at it through those variety of perspectives, I can explain why it's really useful to do a survey such as this. And I've got 5 specific reasons. I think the first one is obviously the one where it allows you to benchmark yourself, and this is against your peers within your sector, but also against your past self. So when you complete it regularly over time, you can then benchmark yourself against previous iterations. And that gives you a clear evidence base regarding your current practices, policies, and culture. As Tara also mentioned, it can be used, and this is the second one, as a roadmap. So it's a roadmap for action. So it doesn't just highlight what's going well, but it also gives you gaps in terms of where there's opportunities to improve. And that allows you then to set some realistic goals, and you can also tackle principles on their own. So maybe tackle principle 2 in a particular year or over 2 or 3 years, and then principle 4 at a later point. And that gives you a structured way of doing it in a systematic fashion. The third benefit is that completing the survey gives you greater internal and external accountability. So, of course, customers, investors, employees, communities, they all want to see organizations actually walk the talk when it comes to equity. And completing the survey demonstrates that commitment, and it provides transparency, and it also allows you to build your reputation in this space as a leader in this area. The fourth benefit is collective impact. Now, a lot of people don't think about this benefit because you're often thinking about your own kind of organizational benefit yourself. But in terms of the collective impact, the more organizations that take part, the stronger the data set we have, the stronger the case studies and range of case studies that can be generated. And this allows us to identify trends, highlight challenges, and that influences the wider discourse on gender equality and inclusive workplaces. That is a benefit not only for individual businesses, but also for the wider economy. And the fifth and last benefit I'll mention, this is the most important one with my economics hat on, is the economics benefit. So when workplaces harness the full potential of diverse perspectives, they make better decisions, and research shows this sparks innovation, and you can then achieve stronger economic outcomes. And as I said, research shows that countries and companies that prioritize inclusion see higher productivity growth. So in short, I told you I'd keep it short. The New Zealand UN WEP survey is a practical and credible way for organizations to measure, improve, and showcase their commitment to gender equality. Thank you.
Gail, thank you so much for that lovely presentation. It means quite a bit coming from you with your expertise, so we're very appreciative of that. I now have the great pleasure of welcoming our next keynote speaker, Dr. Lisa Meehan. She is the director of the New Zealand Policy Research Institute. And Lisa's career spans government, consulting the OECD and academia. At the NZPRI, Lisa's work is centered on evidence-informed policy, ensuring that research and data shape the decisions that improve lives. Her expertise in pay equity, diversity, and workplace productivity has been invaluable in helping administer the WEPs here in Aotearoa. Lisa, we are so pleased to have you with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tara. Just share my slides. And hopefully you can all see those. Great. So thank you, Tara and Gail. So the title of my talk today is about measuring, reflecting, and acting the path to gender equity in New Zealand workplaces. So I just wanted to acknowledge Serene Chua, who's also on the call today. She has been doing a lot of the hard work in the background on the WEP survey for New Zealand, as well as helping put together this presentation. And also Gail, who previously was actually in my role prior to me, and had run this new WEP survey in prior years. So I just won't go over this again because Tara already talked about this. So what are UN WEPs and the 7 principles? I just wanted to say, reiterate what has already been said around this gives organizations a roadmap for change. And it goes right from leadership at the top through to accountability and reporting. And together, these 7 principles create a clear and systematic framework for organizations. And so why are we talking about this today? So the WEP survey for 2025 is now open. And this is actually the first time we've made it available to all organizations in New Zealand. So previously it was focused on WEP signatories. But this makes it an opportunity that we can have a more representative look at what's going on with gender equity in workplaces. And also the survey feeds directly into the White Camellia Awards. So the White Camellia Awards are a great opportunity to get recognition for what organizations are doing in terms of leading the way in gender equality. And just a quick note that we've made a few changes this year to the survey, if any of you responded to the survey in previous years. So to make it a bit more user-friendly, we now have, and also to enable organizations at different stages in their equity journey to participate. We now have all questions relating to WEPs are optional, so you can fill in as much or as little as you like. So if you would like to fill in just one principle, that's perfectly okay. If you'd like to fill in all 7, that's also perfectly okay. As Gail mentioned, this really recognizes that some organizations may be focused on different principles at different time periods. And I think hopefully Madison and Tara have also already sent around the details of how the link to the survey and everything. And if not, we can follow up with that as well after this. Oops, sorry, I completely forgot to go to that slide. That's too many screens open. But those are the details there of the survey. So looking at today's theme, which is measure, reflect, and act. So I'm really just going to echo some things that Gail said here in terms of why does it matter? Because fair workplaces and gender equity, this is not a cost to businesses and it's not a nice to have. It's actually a driver of stronger organizations and in turn, stronger economies. So by measuring, reflecting, and acting, organizations can build equity and they can unlock innovation and productivity and talent. And just a little bit more on why it matters. So we can get top-down change. So this is things like policy changes, really setting the rules. And I kind of think of this as setting the kind of the floor. And this is things like the equal pay legislation. So we all know that in recent months, we've gone backwards in this area in terms of changes to the pay equity settlements, for example. But this makes the bottom up even more important. And the bottom up is where UN WEPs is focused. And it's about empowering organizations to lead change. So both top down and bottom up are important, but UN WEPs focuses on what organizations can do right now. And a little bit more on why this matters. So this is some work we did a couple of years ago looking at pay gaps. This is 2021-22 data. And we still see that even though there has been some progress over the years, there's still quite a sizable gender pay gap. And I also wanted to mention here the ethnicity pay gaps. And the reason for this is that many of the things that you might do in terms of making workplaces more inclusive for women, they also help in terms of making it more inclusive for other groups such as ethnic minorities, disabled people, and so forth. So even though UN WEPs is focused on gender equality, it has wider implications for diversity and inclusion in workplaces. And although it's becoming less common to hear this argument, we do sometimes still hear the argument that, yes, there are gender pay gaps, but there are reasons for that, and there are good reasons for that. And really, we can kind of explain these away in terms of differences in demographics or choices or preferences between men and women. Actually, if we control for everything that we can and see in the data, like differences in demographic characteristics between men and women, differences in where they live, differences in educational characteristics, and things like industry and occupation, we actually see that based on these characteristics, women in New Zealand should actually be paid slightly more than men, but they're actually paid less on average. So this unexplained part, by its nature, we don't know what it is, but it could be things like preferences for non-monetary parts of the job, like flexibility, but it's also things like unconscious bias and discrimination. And in practice, it's probably a mix of all of those factors. And it really shows why organizational action is essential. And one extra little thing I wanted to note in here is that part of the explained part includes things like occupation and industry, but we can also get issues in terms of bias and discrimination in that explained part too. For example, for occupation, women are underrepresented in leadership roles, and at an industry level, we have to also ask the question, why are women in lower paid industries? Or I guess the other way to ask that is, why are industries that are female dominated lower paid? So moving on to measurement. So of course, measurement matters, but it's not just about numbers. And that's really one of the key strengths of the WEPs survey, is that it looks at both quantitative measures like pay gaps, representation and leadership, promotion and retention, but it also looks at qualitative aspects like culture and inclusiveness and employee experience as well. So taken together, these give a fuller picture, not just what the gaps are, but also why they persist. And then moving on to reflect. So of course, numbers are necessary and measurements necessary, but of course it's not enough. We need to take that and do some honest reflection and ask ourselves hard questions like what our blind spots are, why the gaps aren't closing faster, and what is it potentially about our workplace culture or our own bias that could be contributing to inequality. So the WEPs framework supports this deeper reflection by linking that data with organizational practice and also leadership accountability. And then we've got action. So I have a few examples here of some organizations moving from reflection to action. So New Zealand companies, some are now voluntarily publishing pay gap reports. It shows leadership even though there's no legal requirement to do this. So I think Mind the Gap now has 115 organizations registered who are reporting pay gaps. My own organization, AUT, has been publishing annual pay gap reports since 2019. I also wanted to mention, even though it's a top-down policy change, that the Equal Pay Amendment Act 2020 is a really good example of top-down, which was actually born from grassroots advocacy. So this was really born out of the Christine Bartlett case and the union that was behind her as well. And that created a pathway for systematic pay equity claims. and organizational practice shifts as well. We see examples of this, like internal pay gap reporting to boards, revisiting recruitment practices to reduce bias, and developing diversity and equity strategies. Just wanted to leave with a couple of final thoughts, very much in line with what Gail was talking about, that gender equity is, gender equity is not only about fairness, it's not a nice to have, it actually leads to stronger economies. And this is some of the evidence that Gail also talked about, that more diverse leadership leads to higher productivity and innovation, and more diverse workplaces are also higher productivity workplaces. And this is just my final thought in terms of the call to action. So we need both top-down and bottom-up organizational action. And the WEP survey gives practical tools for what organizations can do right now. And as Gail mentioned as well, and Tara, there's an option here in terms of you can pick 1 or 2 principles and work on those. So it gives you a staircase systematic way to improve. Of course, the first step is to sign the CEO statement of support, which is a visible commitment to gender equity, and then complete the 2025 WEP survey, which, as Gail said, gives you a benchmark for how you're performing in terms of over time, if you fill it out over subsequent years, as well as benchmark against other organizations. And these also feed directly into the White Camellia Awards, and also just a reminder that you can fill in as much or as little as you like in the survey. So if you only want to tell us about one principle that you've been focusing on in your organization, that is really great. We'd love to hear about it. And most importantly, act. So lead by example in your organization and inspire others across Aotearoa. And that is me, Tara.
Lisa, thank you so much for your thoughtful contribution, echoing what you've said, that there is an increase in innovation, productivity, and profit when we prioritize the right values. I'm now very delighted to introduce our panel, which comprises, of course, of Lisa Mihan, Desiree Kirby, who is representing Zonta International District 16, and Christine Berridge, representing BPW New Zealand. Together, they bring deep expertise and experience as judges and advocates of the women's empowerment principles. As part of today's discussion, we also want to share insights from the judging of UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand's 2024, with reflections from Judge Catherine van der Meulen, representing UN Women, who was unable to be with us today, but I'm happy to share on her behalf. What are the judges looking for? What are some great examples from the 2024 entrants? What are some actions that organizations can take? I'd now like to invite the judging panel to share a point each on what they're looking for in responses to this year's survey. I'd also like to invite all of our esteemed participants to please put in the chat any questions that they have. There is no question too big or too small. If we are unable to get to your specific question during the course of this call, we will be sure to answer the question post the call in a follow-up. Starting left to right on my screen, I will start with Desiree Kirby. So Desiree, would you mind sharing a little bit about what the judges are looking for in response to this year's survey? And we'll pass it on to Christine and follow up with Lisa. Desiree, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tara. It's an absolute honour to be a judge of the White Camellia Awards on behalf of Zonta International District 16. I find it a very affirming experience to see the work that is going on out there. Some things that I'm looking for as a judge with the awards, please give specifics around things. If you look at Principle 6, for example, around promoting equality through community initiatives and advocacy, it's wonderful if you're telling us that, you know, you support women's shelter, you support whatever particular organisations that you are supporting, but how? What are the details? So it's easy to support someone providing funding, but are you actually genuinely collaborating and engaging with those communities, and how is that benefiting your staff as well as those organisations? So that's probably the point I'll mention, and then hand over to my fellow judges as well. Thank you.
As Desiree said, it is an honour to be able to support and judge these awards. Moving into the second year, definitely will be looking deeper into the drop downs and some of the principles, because it's all very well to, I guess the word is, skim over items, but knowing that companies are setting targets and having plans and doing reviews, I think that's really important. It'll be something that I look for. Along with the fact that we look to partner with different organisations, as Desiree said, maybe in that sponsorship donation area, but we also look to utilise organisations that are also supporting the WEPs or have diversity programs, and I think those are things that I'll be looking for also this year. Thank you.
So Lisa, I know that you are not a judge, but I wondered if you had any thoughts because of the perspective that you have with the insights of coming at this from the data and the implementation and creation of this survey.
I think that really just echoes what has already been said in terms of, even also as, I guess, a researcher, I also like hearing the details and I guess anecdotal evidence of what people are doing in their organizations. And I think as well, sometimes when, we've been really, if an organization has been really championing gender equity for quite a number of years and have done so many different things, I think sometimes that becomes, it's nice that it becomes part of the everyday of what they do, but then I think also it can be very easy to forget to actually tell us about that because it's just so much part of the everyday thing that you do. So remember stuff which might seem actually obvious, or you just think, oh, that's just part of business as usual, but actually if it's something that is really promoting gender equity, please also tell us about it.
Tara, may I just jump in on that, because I think that's a really valid point that Lisa raises. It can be easy to just embed the things that you are already doing and not tell us about them. And please remember, each question stands on its own. So there may be things that you've already mentioned in another question that really should also be being mentioned again for a follow-up question, particularly if that's forming a basis for the work that you're doing in this other area. So refer back to that information, even if you have to, but make sure that you are capturing all that you are doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Desiree, Christine, and Lisa. Now, before we move on to sort of our recap here on the first question, I was hoping that we might discuss a little bit of what's changed in the survey this year, what new additions have been made, and how does this help our survey participants, our signatories, and our supporters to be able to do just as Desiree was saying, really share in detail, highlight the good work that they're doing. So Christine, Lisa, Desiree, would either of you like to field that?
I can start. I guess the ability to just concentrate on one principle. Previously, I feel have seen that people stop and start because they're not quite sure where they fit in things. But any organisation can probably pull out one of those principles and fill in a huge amount of data and feel that they're achieving something and being relevant in what's happening in their workplace. Sometimes it's very difficult to spread that across all 7. And that's just about the timeliness of it, the size of your workforce, the people that you've got involved, and I guess last year we brought in the fact that more than one person was able to fill in these surveys. So that in turn, I guess, lessens not so much the responsibility, but the time that sometimes needs to be spent on these surveys. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Christine. So I think that's a really valid and very important point that I'd just like to highlight is that for the 2025 survey now, we have the ability to, as was mentioned, have organizations really drill into and focus on a single particular question if that is what they want, and really highlight the good work that they're doing with respect to a certain principle. They can choose one principle or all 7 principles. And in addition to that, the Elisa and her team have helped so that we can streamline the amount of work and time that goes into completing this survey, meaning that if different individuals within your organization are having ownership of particular programs or work, they can fill those out. And in the past, we were limited where only a singular survey could respond, but now we have the ability to have you really collaborate with your colleagues in a meaningful way to highlight the good work that your organization is doing with respect to the WEPs.
I just wanted to add to that as well that also everyone is free to get in contact with us if they have any issues filling out the survey, whether they have any questions about specific questions, or, for example, if they have technical issues. We know that some organizations, they're kind of locked down, their computer systems, or IT systems are locked down, and so they have issues accessing the survey interface, and we can always do things like send a Word version of the questionnaire if that's helpful.
That's very helpful, Lisa. So if anyone does have any particular technical questions, Lisa and her team would be a wonderful person to direct that to. We will add in the chat the contact information, and also in the follow-up to this with a copy of this recording, some emails that you can get in touch with, because we know that everyone's time is very valuable, and should there be any hiccups, we would like to address those immediately. Thank you so much. Now, moving on here, can you, and this will be open to anyone in the panel, can you share a memorable example of a business, a signatory or a supporter, that has really gone above and beyond in embedding the WEPs into their operations?
Tara, I'll take this one if that's okay to kick off. So for me, our Supreme winner, Home Construction, from last year and the year before, I believe, truly embody the journey that is WEPs, and I think that's really important to to stress that it is a journey, and I think it's a journey that is a never-ending journey, to be honest, in terms of your workplace. So it might be that you are you're answering around 3 or 4 principles, because that that's where you are on your journey at this point, and that's okay. And one of the things that I found with Home Construction was that that they had done a lot of fantastic things that had allowed them to win White Camellia Awards in the past. And then when we looked at them again last year, and the reason why they ended up being the Supreme winner was not only were they still doing all those things, they were continuing to push. And what was absolutely sitting at the heart of what they were doing was that question, how can we make the lives of our people better? And that just shone through with everything they did. And so it wasn't a policy exercise, it wasn't a box ticking exercise, it was about what are more things, what else can we do, how far can we keep pushing the dial to make the lives of our people better, and therefore create a truly equitable and diverse and workplace where staff are valued. So for me, I think that was a wonderful example of where WEPs can take you.
Thanks so much, Desiree. Does anyone else from the panel have some great examples from the 2024 entrants that might inspire those who are looking to fill out for 2025?
Going to say I have noticed that someone from Portia Law is commenting on the chat, and it also reflects on the fact that they last year received awards for 3 of the principals, and it really shows a commitment to their business, their staff, and the well-being of everybody that works in that business. So yeah, yes, you can be the supreme winner, but also you can shine really highly in any of those principles. So I think that, yeah, I'd like to take my hat off to them because they're still out there supporting everyone along the journey as well.
That's wonderful. And, the wonderful leadership on gender equity and procurement and addressing family violence in the legal sector from Portia really, really has stood out. And as Desiree mentioned, home construction, which was our supreme winner in 2024, their parental leave top-ups the internal WEPs committee, which I think is really an interesting model that other organizations may want to emulate. And we'll get a little bit more about that and how you can support your organization with WEPs internally as we close out our seminar here today. But also that home construction had a women's learning and development directory. I think that from UN Women's perspective, KPMG with their public pay gap reporting and their mentoring and their flexible work, that really stood out. And in addition to that, to highlight one of our supporters, the NZDF, their Wahine Toa program and the redesign of the equipment and the uniforms for women was an example that I know that the judges had mentioned previously. And then to cap out on some other great examples, BNZ, their 40-40-20 gender target in leadership, and their menopause awareness initiatives, as well as their structured mentoring. So these are all areas that are really great examples. Some of them are quite unique, and some of them can be easily emulated and scaled through other sister organizations and signatories and supporters. So thank you to our judges for sharing a little bit about some standouts. We often hear about quick wins versus long-term strategy. And so I'd love to know, in your view, Lisa and Desiree and Christine, have you seen these make a real difference? Are there 1 or 2 low lift, high impact practices that organizations can start emulating or putting into practice that would sort of help you as judges and in your acknowledgement of the good work that they're doing?
We might let Lisa answer this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a tricky question, but what I was gonna say maybe doesn't quite answer the question, but is that we're talking about I guess a lot of organizations which are already doing really great work, but for those I guess who are not as far along in the journey, I think that making that leadership commitment is the first step, because then from the leadership everything else flows down from there. So that doesn't quite answer your question, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that different organizations are at different phases in this journey.
That's really important. Do you think the panel can speak a little bit to the different phases that that organizations are in? And if someone, for example, is just taking the decision today to sign their organization up for the WEPs, should they be nervous? Is there anything that should be thought about in the onset? Because we have a variety of organizations, some who have been signatories and supporters now for over a decade, and some who are just getting wind of what the WEPs can do when implemented within an organization. So I don't know if the judges and Lisa, the panel, has any insight into that, because I know that that would be quite interesting for our esteemed guests to hear about today.
Well, I guess I was going to say something very enthusiastic, which is they shouldn't be nervous, they should be excited. And I think was it maybe it was Christine. Someone said that, we're all on a journey. So even organizations who've been doing this for a long time, there's always areas that everyone can improve in. So we're all on a journey.
Yeah, and I think too, no, I don't think they need to be nervous. I think you're right, Lisa, in what you said earlier about, getting that initial sort of CEO sign-off is very important. But I think one of the key things of importance, if you're starting your WEPs journey and even as it continues, is communication out to your staff, because you need to make sure that WEPs isn't siloed in one department in your organisation. You really do want people to be knowing about it right across the organisation, because I really think that is the key to getting genuine engagement and making genuine change. And when people know about these tools that are available, and that your organisation is serious about working in that space, then I think that frees people up to raise issues and to be able to engage in the journey. So I think that's extremely important, that communications aspect.
I was going to say, well, we all agree it needs to come from the top. Just remember, you don't have to be at the top to start the journey. If it's something you're passionate about, take it there. Get some good data or somebody that can speak to you. I mean, there's always somebody at the Women's Empowerment Principles Committee that is available to have that discussion, to help lead the journey. And that would be my other thing, reach out. Just reach out, because there are people out there that will support you any way they can.
And leading into that, oh, Lisa, please go ahead.
I was going to add to that, yes, that often it's also, sometimes it's just that people haven't thought about things, and it just takes one person to say it, no matter what level of the organization they're at, and people to go, oh yeah, just an example with my own organization. For example, we have research expectations because we're a university, and I asked the question, how are you taking into account periods of parental leave, which is still predominantly taken by women? And I said, we hadn't actually explicitly thought about that. And they definitely were not averse to the idea. They definitely wanted to think about it. It's just that no one had kind of mentioned it. But once someone mentions it, then they take it and think about it.
I think that this leads really nicely, and I know that this has been a question from a number of our signatories and supporters, but the WEPs monitoring and evaluation tool, as we know, it provides a framework to measure, reflect, and act. In your view, how can businesses get the most value out of this? And what advice would you give to a company that's using the tool, perhaps for the first time, perhaps for a decade in? Where should they focus to avoid overwhelm and really make this process of completing the survey add the most value to their organization and to the work that they're leading?
That's a big question.
Did we break it down?
It got bigger as you kept going, Tara.
How can businesses get the most value out of utilizing the monitoring tool? Maybe we'll start there, and then we can jump into any advice that you would give as a judge to help prevent against overwhelm. So first is how does this help organizations? Because clearly, winning an award is fantastic, and this informs that. But the act of actually completing this survey has a great deal of value.
I mean, wearing the engineer hat here, you can't change what you can't measure. You have to be able to have a way to look critically at what you are doing, and then put processes in place. They may work, they may not work, but at least that process allows you to keep coming back to it and to be able to benchmark yourself. I think Gail mentioned being able to benchmark not only amongst your peers externally, but also internally as well.
Thanks, Desiree. Christine, Lisa, do you have any thoughts on how businesses can get the most value out of doing the actual survey?
I'm a big fan of Principle 7, I think, as everyone knows. And, measuring and reporting. And without measuring and reporting, you don't know where you're at. And I'm sure all businesses do this, but this is, just in another sphere. And by that, it captures data. And with having data, so many more things can be achieved. So while there are 7 principles, I think if you've got to start somewhere, maybe there, and that'll lead to the fact that you'll go, I wouldn't say backwards, but there are other principles that you'll go, actually, we're doing really well in that space too, and this is how. But it is that start point.
Yeah. So I thought it was going to be my bias in saying measurement because I'm a quantitative researcher, so I'm glad other people said it as well. And I think it's also one of those things where businesses often have this information, but putting it together in a systematic way to monitor over time is really useful.
Absolutely. Now I've got another question. What role do you see partnerships with the community, civil society, other businesses? How do you see those come into play in overcoming any implementation challenges? So we're taking a step back here more towards the challenges and the solutions about implementing the WEPs. But I wonder if the panel has any thoughts about what role those we are in an ecosystem. And so if an organization is looking to be a leader in the WEPs, how does that come into play?
I think that's a really important point. I mean, there are incredible organisations out there who are working in this space. And I think, I know certainly in terms of Zonta International, our advocacy work that we do is backed up by some very knowledgeable, excellent people in the law space and a range of other spaces who really do their research and put their work in. So, don't reinvent the wheel. Go and have a look at what those community partners have available out there already, the work that they've already done. Maybe there's an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to collaborate with them on something. And so I certainly would recommend involving those organisations where you can, and even to your professional associations. Don't forget about them. It isn't just public kind of sector or charitable space organisations or advocacy organisations. Your professional associations may also be doing work in this space. There's some very good work going on in the engineering field around diversity. The universities who teach the courses that are the foundation of your business, whether that's law or accounting or engineering or construction or whatever it is, also look to them to see what they're doing as well, because there's opportunities there.
I think that's great, Desiree, that really acknowledging that we are never in a silo, and that the work that organizations do, it does have a ripple effect through all of the organizations, businesses, civil society, even within their workforce and the families and the community. So I think that that's really powerful. We've focused a little bit on organizations that are brand new, that have not maybe taken the leap into completing the survey. What about organizations who have completed the survey year after year? What are some of the ways that you've seen these very committed WEPs organizations sustain their commitment and their impact over time? Do you have any advice or guidance for those established organizations who really have positioned themselves as leaders, within their own field, but also within the corporate landscape of Aotearoa New Zealand?
I'll
I
say
would, s-
something,
oh,
one very practical thing, just in terms of even if you've told us about what you've done before in previous surveys, please don't feel scared to repeat. Feel like even if you feel like you're repeating yourself, that it'd be great to hear about it again. And also things like the judging panel may not be exactly the same, or people don't have perfect memory, so they may not remember what you said last year as well. So that was just a practical thing.
Thank you, Lisa.
my thought process is, while we talk about that generally that survey is going to be filled in probably by one person, um, you've got a whole team, and actually getting some feedback from all of them, depending on the size of your organization. I'm sure the Defence Force would find that quite difficult. But reaching out and saying to them, hey, what do you think we've achieved this year? It's much like doing a performance review, isn't it, in your own personal, workplace. It's that reflection. What have I done and what have I done really well? And where are the things that we need to tweak? And I think by getting that feedback from, staff, be it contractors, whatever, however you want to do that, that gives you that next touch point, that next thing to move towards. Or it's going to tell you doing excellent work and you're just going to smile and go, great, we'll just keep doing what we're doing.
And I think too, if you're an organization that's been working in the space for a while, celebrate your successes. Um, Engage your people with celebrating those successes, so that continued enthusiasm is there, and publicly share those successes as well.
Those are some really great tips for our established organizations. And now I've got the $1 million question that we keep getting asked by our signatories and supporters. And looking ahead to 2025, what will impress you as judges the most in terms of how businesses demonstrate improvement and accountability?
Well, that's how long is a piece
No
of string.
pressure.
Just be honest about your journey. Truly, be honest about your journey. What have you done, or if you're new, what are you hoping to do? What have you achieved? What are you planning to focus on next? I think, yeah, for me, it's about just authentically sharing the journey.
I would agree. And I think I go back to that comment, not everything we do works, but report it, because that just adds to the value of, look, we've tried this, it hasn't quite panned out for us. We're now having a relook at it. But as Desiree said, we don't want to also focus on negativity. So there's always going to be a positive that comes out of everything that you try or do. And look, having only been a judge for 1 year, I have to say, the information that came through last year, it's amazing, and it just blows your mind at the ability that these organisations have to work with the tools that we have, not just the WEPs tools, but you look at our legislation changes and cultural changes, etc. So celebrate all those wins and put it on paper because we want to hear about it.
That's wonderful. So we want to hear about where organizations are looking forward to. We want to hear about programs or instances that things didn't quite turn out the way as planned, and I think that that's really valuable to understand that the journey itself. The cliche saying is sometimes more important than the destination, but I think that's really quite relevant here. We're going to wrap up this panel with a concluding question, and that is, how can the framework, such as WEPs, help organizations move beyond good intentions, because I would wager that they're there, towards measurable and meaningful change? And does this panel have any insights or reflections about about that and how organizations can embrace the dreams and the wishes and the goals that they have in this space and make them actionable.
I was just going to say probably one word sums it up in terms of accountability. That when you have the principles, it means that you've got a roadmap to thinking about how you can turn this into action, and you also have a set of tools where you can be accountable to yourself, to your and have measurable outcomes.
And I was going to use the roadmap word as well from Gail earlier, because I think, it's such a big issue. It's such an important issue. How do you work your way through it? And I think that the WEPs principles does provide that pathway for you.
So some actions that organizations can take is make it visible and publish the commitments, submit those, what worked, what didn't work, and celebrate the milestones. Also enhance and strengthen the support that you're giving to your organization. So, for example, enhanced parental leave, flexible workplace, well-being initiatives, being able to showcase these as priorities for organizations. Another action for organizations could be investing in growth, so expanding training and mentoring for women and track update and outcomes. And then, of course, from the supply chain perspective, how can organizations adopt diverse procurement and partner with women-owned and operated suppliers? From a partnership and engagement perspective, collaborating with iwi, women's organizations, mentoring programs. There's a wealth of knowledge and expertise, especially within the women's empowerment scope in New Zealand, to draw upon the WEPs partners and WEPs committee, for example. And then, of course, transparency. So, this will speak to Lisa, but measuring the pay gaps, reporting it publicly, and joining initiatives such as Mind the Gap and other organizations. And I think that this is something that I get consistently asked from our signatories and supporters is, we are a WEPs signatory, or we're thinking about becoming a WEPs signatory, but we also would like to join this. And the answer is WEPs is complementary to all of these initiatives and all of these aligning programs. It only strengthens the work that you can do within those initiatives and within the WEPs. And so the goal really is embrace it all, I think, and take every tool that you have at your fingertips to really move the ticker for change. I'd like to thank our esteemed panel for your insights today. I'd like to thank judges Christine and Desiree for giving their insights around what's worked, what's helpful, what can organizations do, how can businesses get the greatest value, and the advice for first-time organizations, and looking ahead what other organizations who have been really pioneering the WEPs can do. As we close, I want to extend a heartfelt thanks to each of you for joining today. Our deep gratitude to Professor Gail Pacheco and Lisa Mihan for their wisdom, and to our esteemed panelists for their guidance. I'd also like to thank our WEPs signatories and supporters. Your commitment is what drives change forward, and it is an honor on behalf of all of our 4 partnering organizations to be able to support you in that work. We'd like to conclude, and I want to return to the heart of today's conversation, the Gender Equity Survey. This tool is more than a measure. It is a statement of leadership. It is a source of credibility and a spark for change. And by taking part, organizations place themselves in the company of leaders who recognize that gender equality is not simply good practice, it's good business, and it is good for society. The survey provides clarity, visibility, and momentum, and it helps you set meaningful goals and showcase the progress that your organization is making to stakeholders and attracting the talent who will carry your organization into the future. So whether you are a long-standing WEPs signatory, which we thank you, or just beginning your WEPs journey, in which we welcome you, participation signals courage, responsibility, and action. There is another something that I would like to mention here, and I would like to tease, this is a soft launch, a glimpse of what lies ahead, if you will, and this is applicable to each and every one on this webinar today. Later this year, the UN Women's Empowerment Principles in New Zealand Committee will be launching the WEPs Advocate campaign, which will enable individual change makers, community leaders, retired professionals, passionate advocates, and corporate leaders such as yourselves to become certified WEPs advocates. And this will be another way to amplify our impact together. So thank you again for your presence, your dedication, and your leadership. Together, we are not only advancing gender equality, we are shaping a more just and inclusive future. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Take care.